Hello, this is Timothy Johns, your instructor, and what I'm going to do in this YouTube posting is to provide a number of short talks on the life and times of Michael K. by J.M. Coetzee. And I'm going to start by just saying some general things about the novel, and then we'll get into specific passages. The first thing to notice is that the novel takes place over, it's divided into three parts, 1, 2, and 3. In the first part, we're introduced to Michael K. and his mother, who live in Cape Town. And clearly there's, not only is Cape Town mentioned, but place names within Cape Town are mentioned, and place names of the Western Cape are mentioned. So unlike Waiting for the Barbarians, we know that we're in a very specific place and in a very specific country at the beginning. And his mother, who desires to leave Cape Town and go back to her country home, fills up the sort of narrative sequence of the first part. In the second part of the novel, out of the blue, we're introduced to a doctor. And this part of the novel is told from a first-person point of view, whereas the first part is told from a third point of view, omniscient point of view. Here, we have a first-person singular point of view that describes, of a doctor who describes Michael K. and his condition, and how he fits into the camp, and really how he fits into the larger world, or doesn't fit into the larger world. And in the third part, part 3 of the novel, we return to an omniscient third-person perspective, point of view, in which Michael K. returns, and he is returning to Cape Town. And he has his first sexual experiences, his first experiences with liquor, at least that we know about, and the novel ends there. So it seems that the first thing to think about, I guess, is that unlike Waiting for the Barbarians, here we seem to have the main figure under consideration is a figure of color, a black or colored South African. Though again, that's mediated by the fact that the second part of the novel is told from a first-person perspective, a more direct perspective, in which we have perhaps a white narrator. It seems like a white narrator that's never openly declared. But the other part that's kind of strange is that this figure is not really part of an anti-apartheid movement, although many of the authorities allege that he's assisting these rebels on the frontier. He's actually quite naive. He's not involved in the movement in any kind of collectivist capacity. To see something like that, you would read J.M. Coetzee's novel Age of Iron, which comes later, which is about blacks in the township, rising together collectively against the status quo, against the state. The other thing to notice is that he has a strange name. His name is Michael K. And it might seem at first that there's maybe an allusion to Malcolm X and other people who were kind of renouncing their last name that was imposed upon them by a settler society, by white society. And certainly there's an element of that there. But I think more deliberately, the K refers to Kafka, Franz Kafka, the the writer of Prague, who conveyed this sort of almost the ways in which bureaucracy had taken over our lives, and in which we were kind of entered this maze of society where we could never find our way out of it because the bureaucracy modern bureaucracy had imprinted itself upon us. And in fact, many people talk about Kafka in terms of Kafka, who was Jewish, anticipating concentration camps and a kind of totalitarianism, totalitarian bureaucracy, and certainly all the allusions to camps and internment camps in Life and Times of Michael K. Underscore that. The other thing is that, much like Kafka, there's a kind of parable element to the novel, in the same way that Kafka allegorizes, the trial, a modern trial, or uses, talks about someone waking up as an insect as a way to kind of allegorize our positions in everyday life and in modernity. So too, J.M. Coetzee uses this kind of allegory of the garden and of a kind of naive individual wanting to develop this garden as a kind of an allegory in the same way that Kafka had. The other thing to notice from at least a South African perspective is that Coetzee inverts a traditional model that we often find in the South African novel that's called the Jim Goes to Joburg novel. There's a kind of typical dimension to the South African novel that begins with Alan Paton's Cry, the Beloved Country that was published in 1948, of a naive black African from the countryside who heads to the city and is corrupted and is destroyed by the city, by the mining, by the kind of architecture of apartheid in the city. Coetzee reverses that, and in this novel, obviously, we have a departure from Cape Town, an escape from Cape Town that's being destroyed by the civil war, in which there's riots and in which there's kind of robbery and violence everywhere. And his mother wants to live back in the countryside, or at least die back in the countryside. So he heads for the countryside and evades all of these checkpoints, etc., to get her back there until she dies. Now, what's interesting about this is that it calls into question the naivete of the main character. And we'll get to some passages that allude to this, but in many points in the novel, they refer to him as an idiot, and he himself at some points kind of questions that, or kind of doesn't really confront the fact that other people are calling him an idiot, even though he finds himself just to be normal in his brain like everyone else, or maybe just unusual, but still kind of normal. So from a South African perspective, you have to kind of recognize that that Coetzee is kind of toying with the traditional trope of the Jim Goes to Joburg novel, in which the kind of provincial outsider heads to the city and is corrupted. Here we have a reversal of that pattern, though at the end, again, he does return to Cape Town and is corrupted in some ways. Let me just stop there, and then we'll go on to a second part in which I read specific passages from the book. This is part 2 of our talk on Life and Times of Michael K. One thing I wanted to mention, and I forgot to mention it in the first section of this talk, is that Coetzee is very much thinking about Russian literature in this novel. Remember, in the autobiographies, there were a lot of allusions to Russian culture and Russian history, and especially Soviet history, really as a kind of counterbalance to the West and to South African interests and American interests and British interests in the Cold War, just to almost take an oppositional point of view. And though Coetzee's narrator never really mentioned specific Russian writers, clearly in this book, Life and Times of Michael K., he's thinking about Fyodor Dostoevsky. Dostoevsky was the author, obviously, of Brothers Karamazov, of Crime and Punishment, The Possessed, and he also wrote, Coetzee did, a novel called The Master of Petersburg, which is kind of about, from the perspective of Dostoevsky, after Dostoevsky returns from Western Europe to Russia after the death of his son. And in Life and Times of Michael K., the most closest allusion to Dostoevsky is The Idiot. And again, there's a little bit of overlap here with Kafka, but it's very marginal. And in The Idiot, it's a novel about a hero named Prince Mushkin. And what Dostoevsky was trying to invent in this case was a kind of perfect soul, a perfect, really Christian soul, a perfectly good person. And really he tried to demonstrate how impossible it is to be perfectly good and perfectly naive in the world. And so where Dostoevsky presents that through a Christian perspective, Coetzee presents that through almost a kind of universalist perspective, in which our cultivation of the earth, the basic things that we do as human beings in terms of making food and surviving, and really trying to shut out society in general, become impossible, because society is always going to intrude. There's no way out of the kind of apparatus of society that's imposed upon us. So the part I want to read is when he finally, for the first time escapes or seems to escape from the apparatus of society, and he finds this farm outside of Prince Albert that perhaps his mother had grown up on as a servant girl. And so he finally sees himself outside of things. The farm is destroyed, and he can kind of live on his own and just cultivate the soil in a kind of almost a kind of essentialist way as a human being with the soil. And this is on page 59. It might be hard to find if you have a different edition, but the first line is, "This was the beginning of his life as a cultivator." This was the beginning of his life as a cultivator. On a shelf in the shed, he had found a packet of pumpkin seeds, some of which he had already idly roasted and eaten. He still had the mealy kernels, and on the pantry floor, he had even picked up a solitary bean. Mealy kernels, by the way, are corn kernels. Mealy is a word for corn in South Africa. In the space of a week, he cleared the land near the dam and restored the system of furrows that irrigated it. Then he planted a small patch of pumpkins and a small patch of mealies, and some distance away on the riverbank, where he would have to carry water to it, he planted his bean, so that if it grew, it could climb into the thorn trees. For the most part, he was living on birds that he killed with his catapult. His days were divided between this form of hunting, which he carried on near the farmhouse, and the tilling of the soil. His deepest pleasure came at sunset, when he turned open the cock at the dam wall and watched the stream of water run down its channels to soak the earth, turning it from fawn to deep brown. "It is because I am a gardener," he thought, "because that is my nature." He sharpened the blade of his spade on a stone, the better to savor the instant when it clove the earth. The impulse to plant had been reawoken in him. Now, in a matter of weeks, he found his waking life bound tightly to the patch of earth he had begun to cultivate and the seeds he had planted there. There were times, particularly in the mornings, when a fit of exultation would pass through him at the thought that he, alone and unknown, was making this deserted farm bloom. But following upon exultation would sometimes come a sense of pain that was obscurely connected with the future, and then it was only brisk work that could keep him from lapsing into gloominess. So interestingly, I'm just pause there. There's a kind of idealization of living within the soil, but problematically, as we get to the second part, you wonder if he's really going to be able to survive on this strange diet of pumpkins and birds, etc. Okay. So I'm going to skip a paragraph. He lived by the rising and setting of the sun, in a pocket outside time. Cape Town and the war and his passage to the farm slipped further and further into forgetfulness. So it's this idea of almost living in this circular universe, whereas history is almost a straight line that's, that kind of threads everyone into its web. Here he's imagining that he's kind of outside of time, outside of history, living within the circles of the seasons and the patterns of nature. But just as Michael K. begins to understand himself as a gardener, as a cultivator of life, working one-on-one with the soil, alone in the world, all of that is shattered when a deserting soldier shows up on the farm. So let me read this part, and this is on page 60. Then one day, returning to the house at noontime, Michael saw the front door wide open, and while he stood confounded, a figure emerged from the interior into the sunlight, a pale, plump young man in khaki uniform. "Do you work here?" were the stranger's first words. He stood at the head of the steps as if he owned the house. There was nothing for Kay to do but nod. "I have never seen you before," said the stranger. "Are you looking after the farm?" Kay nodded. "When did the kitchen fall in like that?" he asked. Trying to bring out words, Kay stumbled. The stranger did not shift his gaze from Kay's bad mouth. Then he spoke again. "You don't know who I am, do you?" he said. "I am Boss Vizagi's grandson." So what Coetzee introduces here is a sort of classical paradigm of masters and servants, where Michael K. had once been independent, or for this brief period independent as a cultivator of the soil. Now he's got to share the land with a second person. And what happens in this new paradigm is a kind of system that mirrors something like Robinson Crusoe's, Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe. If you know Coetzee's work, one of his earlier books is called Foe, and it's based loosely on Defoe's Robinson Crusoe. And what Michael K. finds immediately is that he does not want to become a servant to this new arrival. And this is on page 65. He says, already it was hard to believe that he had known someone called the visagee grandson who had tried to turn him into a body servant. In a day or two, he told himself he would forget the boy and remember only the farm. And this is when he's already left the farm and just decided to flee this relationship with the deserting soldier who wants him to be his servant, essentially. So I guess the general point I want to make here is that though this novel is layered with all kinds of literary and historical allusions, at the core of it, I think, is this question of how can we escape our responsibilities in society? How can we get outside of the social contract, which sort of, draws us into a relationship with others? In what ways can we, is it feasible to live on our own? Why is it immoral or unethical, if at all, to live alone in this way, and to sort of ignore the greater world? And that's, I think, the key problem that Coetzee posits in the end of the first section. So I'm going to go into part 2 of the novel in the next part. Welcome to part 3 of our discussion of Life and Times of Michael K. And in this part, we're going to talk about part 2 of the novel, in which this doctor appears out of the blue, something that frustrates some readers because a lot of readers really become enamored with Michael K's world, and then suddenly we have this first-person perspective, sort of viewing Michael K in this new way. Last time I read the novel, I remember being kind of bummed when I came to this part, but this time I found it much more interesting. And so one way to think about the doctor is to think about the context in which he operates, and that is not entirely unlike the magistrate in Waiting for the Barbarians, as a kind of functionary within the bureaucratic system, and someone who's sympathetic to native people in the region. And these camps are interesting on a couple of levels. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, that there's some kind of allusion to kind of Nazism here, though the discussions within the camps themselves are, oh, this is a camp, this is much better than prison, they'll send you to this place where it's hard labor, etc., much like the Nazi kind of prison camps. But another way to think about the camp is in terms of its relationship to sort of apartheid ideology and the longer sort of history of European ideology in Southern Africa, in which black people were considered lazy, and you needed to, unless you kind of guided them and institutionalized them, they were not going to work. They were not going to work for a living. They would have everything given to them and handed out to them. And so that's why the guards are always barking to these people, to the people in the camp, that you're here to work, you're not here to be lazy, etc. And so the irony of this is that Michael K has obviously been working hard and been relocated in this camp. And part of the reason they relocated him to this camp is they think he's actually feeding the militants. The farm that he's begun to work on is being used to feed the militants. So the doctor begins to wonder. He becomes very fascinated with Michael K, and a lot of people wonder why he's giving his fellow white authorities, or wonder why he gives all of this special treatment to Michael K. But it really becomes this almost existential problem of placing Michael K in the world, or the Michael Ks of the world within the world. And so this is the letter he writes to Michael, who he addresses as Michaels throughout. And part of that, by the way, I think it's a kind of reflection on people's mispronunciation of Coetzee's own name. You'll see these kinds of mistakes of names throughout Coetzee is over, and I think it's because his name is authoritatively pronounced Coetzee, but people say Coetzee or Coetzee, all kinds of things. But anyway, that's a sidebar. So this is the letter he writes to Michaels on 149. Dear Michaels, the answer is because I want to know your story. I want to know how it happened that you of all people have joined in a war in which you have no place. You are no soldier, Michaels. You are a figure of fun, a clown, a wooden man. What is your business in this camp? There is nothing we can do here to rehabilitate you from the vengeful mother with flaming hair who comes to you in your dreams. And what is there for us to rehabilitate you into? Basket work? Lawn mowing? You are like a stick insect, Michaels, whose sole defense against a universe of predators is its bizarre shape. You are like a stick insect that has landed, God knows how, in the middle of a great wide, flat, bare, concrete plain. You raise your single fragile stick legs one at a time. You inch about looking for something to merge with, and there is nothing. Why did you ever leave the bushes, Michaels? That was where you belonged. You should have stayed all your life clinging to a nondescript bush in a quiet corner of an obscure garden in a peaceful suburb, doing whatever it is that stick insects do to maintain life, nibbling a leaf here and there, eating at an odd aphid, drinking dew, and, if I may be personal, you should have got away at an earlier age from that mother of yours who sounds like a real killer. You should have found yourself another bush as far as possible from her and embarked upon an independent life. You made a great mistake, Michaels, when you tied her on your back and fled the burning city for the safety of the countryside. Because when I think of you carrying her, panting under her weight, choking in the smoke, dodging the bullets, performing all the other feats of filial piety you no doubt performed, I also think of her sitting on your shoulders, eating out your brains, glaring about triumphantly, the very embodiment of the great Mother Death. And now that she is gone, you are plotting to follow her. I have wondered what it is you see, Michaels, when you open your eyes so wide. For you certainly do not see me. You certainly do not see the white walls and the empty beds of the infirmary. You do not see Felicity in her snow-white turban. What do you see? It is your mother in her circle of flaming hair, grinning and beckoning to you with her crooked finger to pass through the curtain of light and join her in the world beyond. Does that explain your indifference to life? Another thing I would like to know is what the food was that you ate in the wilderness that has made all the other food tasteless to you. The only food you have ever mentioned is pumpkin. You even carry pumpkin seeds with you. Is pumpkin the only feed they know in the Karoo? And the Karoo is the semi-desert area to the east of the Cape where this part of the novel takes place. Am I to believe that you lived for a year on pumpkin? The human body is not capable of that, Michaels. What else did you eat? Did you hunt? Did you make yourself a bow and arrows and hunt? Did you eat roots and berries? Did you eat locusts? Your papers say that you were an opgårdner, a storage man. But they do not say what it was you stored. Was it manna? Did manna fall from the sky for you? And did you store it away in the underground bins for your friends to come and eat in the night? That is why you will not eat camp food, because you have been spoiled forever by the taste of manna? You should have hidden, Michaels. You were too careless of yourself. You should have crept away in the darkest reach of the deepest hole and possessed yourself in patience till the troubles were over. Did you think you were a spirit invisible, a visitor on our planet, a creature beyond the reach of laws of nations? Well, the laws of nations have you in their grip now. They have pinned you down in a bed beneath the grandstand of the old Kenilworth racecourse. They will grind you in the dirt if necessary. The laws are made of iron, Michaels. I hope you are learning that. No matter how thin you make yourself, they will not relax. So it's a wonderful letter about not just how to place Michael in the world, but of the doctor's own frustration of making everybody fit in society, giving everybody a fair shake in society. I mean, he bends over backwards to keep Michael alive, and in many ways, perhaps Michael would not have lived without this doctor's care. But the doctor is just confounded by the fact that Michael doesn't seem to fit within the logic of society. Okay, I'm going to end that part there, and we'll have one last concluding part. This is part 4 of our talk on Life and Times of Michael K. And in this party, I think the race course actually is in Cape Town, and it's become this kind of camp. But they've moved him from the Karoo into the race course, and then he escapes from that, and he's hanging around with these kind of, basically, street people of Cape Town who are just living in boxes on the side of the road. And in a weird way, this is the most interiority of that we find of Michael K. in the whole novel. And by that, I mean the most that we really get in his brain and start to think through him rather than, and think according to him rather than kind of look at him as a kind of an object, a creature moving through the landscape. And part of that might have to do with the fact that he's had his first kind of sexual awakening. He's been drinking a little bit. And so this is on page 181. It's about 4 pages from the end of the novel. He could not sleep. Against his will, the memory returned of the cask of silver hair bent over his sex, and the grunting of the girl as she labored on him. I have become an object of charity, he thought. Everywhere I go, there are people waiting to exercise their forms of charity on me. All these years, and I still carry the look of an orphan. They treat me like the children of Jackastriff, whom they were prepared to feed because they were still too young to be guilty of anything. From the children they expected only a stammer of thanks in return. From me they want more because I have been longer in the world. They want me to open my heart and tell them the story of a life lived in cages. They want to hear about the cages I have lived in, as if I were a bougie, or a white mouse, or a monkey. And if I had learned if I had learned storytelling at Huis Norenius instead of potato peeling in sums, if they had made me practice the story of my life every day, standing over me with a cane till I could perform without stumbling, I might have known how to please them. I would have told the story of a life passed in prisons where I stood day after day, year after year, with my forehead pressed to the wire, gazing into the distance, dreaming of experiences I would never have, and where the guards called me names and kicked my backside and sent me to scrub the floor. When my story was finished, people would have shaken their heads and been sorry and angry and plied me with food and drink. Women would have taken me into their beds and mothered me in the dark. Whereas the truth is that I have been a gardener, first for the council, later for myself, and gardeners spend their time with their noses to the ground. Kay tossed restlessly on the cardboard. It excited him, he found to say recklessly, the truth about me. I am a gardener, he said again aloud. On the other hand, was it not strange for a gardener to be sleeping in a closet within the sound of the beating of the waves of the sea? I am more like an earthworm, he thought, which is also a kind of gardener, or a mole, also a gardener, that does not tell stories because it lives in silence. But a mole or an earthworm on a cement floor? He tried to relax his body inch by inch, as he had once known how to do. At least, he thought, at least I have not been clever and come back to Sea Point full of stories of how they beat me in the camps till I was thin as a rake and simple in the head. I was mute and stupid in the beginning. I will be mute and stupid at the end. There is nothing to be ashamed of in being simple. They were locking up simpletons before they locked up anyone else. Now they have camps for children whose parents run away, camps for people who kick and foam at the mouth, camps for people with big heads and people with little heads, camps for people with no visible means of comfort, camps for people chased off the land, camps for people they find living in stormwater drains, camp for street girls, camps for people who can't add 2 and 2, camps for people who forget their papers at home, camps for people who live in the mountains and blow up bridges in the night. Perhaps the truth is that it is enough to be out of the camps, out of all the camps at the same time. Perhaps that is enough of an achievement for the time being. How many people are there left who are neither locked up nor standing guard at the gate? I have escaped the camps. Perhaps if I lie low, I will escape the charity too. So this is a wonderful monologue in which I think in the most full-throated way, despite, having a narrator or having a main character with a hair lip who's kind of has difficulty speaking and therefore almost can't make his own voice heard in the world, Despite all of that, here's a moment, a really beautiful moment where he does find his own voice, returning to Cape Town, and notice how that the repetition of the sort of camps at the end, and there's a camp for everything, and how everyone has to kind of be institutionalized. Everyone is kind of amoral or anormal, unnormal. Or everyone is kind of amoral. Everyone's not fitting into the kind of boxes prescribed, not only by apartheid, but I would say by society in general. I mean, this is a commentary clearly on this sort of draconian, totalitarian nature of the apartheid regime. But I think it's also a novel on the nature of just the totalitarian framework of modernity and the modern bureaucracy in which everyone is caught up in. And that concludes our discussion of Life and Times of Michael K.